friends, welcome to another Hung VANNGO beauty video. I posted my first impressions thank you video where the team over at Hung VANNGO Beauty were so kind enough to send me PR, and I just quickly went through the entire collection, but I didn't have much information except what was included in the package. But now that Hung has uploaded his video introducing his brand, I have a little more detail about it as well as pricing, because it is now available on Sephora and in Sephora stores. I don't know if all of them, but I think most of them now carry Hung VANNGO Beauty. So it is an exciting time, and I wanted to come back on here and swatch the rest of the eyeshadow palettes, because in all we have 8 total colorways and they each retail for $49. And I show the packaging in my first impressions video, but you have this soft touch packaging, and the reason why it's this orange red is that this is Hung's favorite color, so it is officially, of course, as you see, the brand color, and they are made in Italy. 12 months suggested shelf life and 8 color stories. And in Hung's video where he was explaining the color story eyeshadow palette, that is the official name, color story eyeshadow palette, emphasizing the fact that he wanted to develop palettes that were more streamlined and easier to follow. Hung was describing from a customer point of view where he's encountered these eyeshadow palettes that might have a neutral shades, mostly neutral shades, and then all of a sudden you have a wild card shade that could be a blue or purple, and he wanted to put himself in the customer's shoes and said, I would be confused if I were to buy a palette like that and not know how to navigate it or use it. And I think that's why he insisted on separating the palettes into their own color story. So if you wanted the greens or the blues, you could just buy that palette. I do understand, however, for someone like myself who's comfortable with eyeshadow palettes, that I don't mind color stories that include different shades or different colors. But I understand how Hung would release color story specific palettes first for his initial launch. So let's start with Wonderful Warm, and we have, I think, 4 textures in all, because Hung described the matte, the powder matte, but he also has what he says creamy matte, but he doesn't completely classify it as a creamy matte. It's like a hybrid, like Lisa's Velvets, Natasha's creamy matte, like cream to powder shadows, those like velvety texture shadows that feel not completely powder in pan but apply like a powder when in contact with the lids, a metallic and a shimmer. So let's start with this beautiful like bronzy metallic shade. I mean, the shine is out of control with that metallic. Love how that looks. Then we have what I think is a hybrid type of a matte. Do you see that sheen? And I think it's what gives away this kind of creamier matte formula in the palettes. That's pretty. I like that. Now we have our beige shimmer, which is going to be our highlight shade for brow bone in the corner or in the lid, or even on the lid. What appears to be a gold bronze. Ooh. I think this might be another matte hybrid. It feels creamy in the pan. That's lovely. And I think this might be a more, yes, traditional matte. So you see the more powder texture that exists in the actual powder matte, and oh boy, that is your espresso. Our warm beige here. And our champagne highlight. Wonderful Warm, I think, is a nice balance between warm and neutral, because he does have the orange one that I demonstrated in my first video. I'm happy with how Hung kind of like sat in the middle for Wonderful Warms, not it being too orangey, you know what I mean? But let's contrast that with new Neutral, and we'll start off with this taupe that looks to be an actual powder matte. Right under we have, let's see, this is, I think, the hybrid. You see how it has that little bit of sheen to distinguish it from, if you can see the texture here, definitely that has more of a powder matte finish, and this has more of like that hybrid, I'm gonna say creamy matte just for the sake of it, but I know Hung didn't want to describe it as such, but demi matte maybe? How about that? Ooh, the shiny is next. That's beautiful. Nice. It's almost like a rose gold. Underneath, I think this is another one of the hybrid the demi matte, a true powder matte ivory shade. We got a lot of sparkly arclies in the neutral. First we have the ivory, we have what I think might be more of a shimmer, and lastly the shiny taupe. So here you go, champagne-y, taupey. Oh, that's pretty. I like that color a lot. It's a taupe, but it's not so cool tone. It has like, it's almost like a mauve taupe. It's like my top. And lastly, we have this beautiful champagne metallic. So compared to Wonderful Warm, you see that there is some similarity, but there's more of like the gold coppery tones to Wonderful Warms, whereas the neutrals, I think neutral is pretty solid. So I thought, why don't we get through all the swatches first and then we'll go into the demos. How does that sound? Let's wipe these arms. So let's get into the reds and the purples. This first shade feels more of like a traditional shimmer. So it doesn't have as much shine as the dedicated metallics, but I like the texture where I feel you could just easily place it on the lid for that all over color effect. And this, my goodness, this looks to be a true powder matte brick red. The demi matte, well, I think this is like a, yes, a true rose. Isn't that lovely? The high shine metallic, here we come in this beautiful, almost like electric pink shade. Very fluorescent. This feels to be more, well, actually, it takes on a similar characteristic as the fluorescent pink, but this is actually more lavender. That's pretty. A true powder matte deep rose. This feels to be a more traditional light pink shimmer and a pastel pink powder matte. Interesting, Rebellious red and pink, but I would consider this lavender to be like a wild card shade in this palette. Now off to Passionate Purple. This first one here is, I think, going to be this demi matte because it has that sheen to it. Yes, the one under it looks to be more of like a violet, and this more of like an orchid, and that is, I think, a more traditional powder matte. We have the shimmer and we have this almost like purple blue metallic. The shimmer and the metallic. Oh boy, this is almost like a cool purple gray, and underneath it more like a lilac, both being traditional powder mattes. And lastly, we have this almost icy lavender metallic, and underneath a more traditional shimmer, or excuse me, that one, well, I'll show you with the swatch. First is the icy lilac. You see is a lot icier than the first metallic we swatched. And this is like the powder matte with pearl in it. It's hard to see the pearl in the swatch. You can see it in the actual pan, but when swatched, it just looks like your pastel pink powder matte. So here we have Rebellious red and pink, Passionate Purple. Passionate Purple is pretty because I like how Hung went more lilac cool overall and not plummy, if that makes any sense. This is a really nice color story for those who love purple. Next, we have generous greens and yellow with brilliant blue. Just from how the pan looked, this, yes, no? I thought it was gonna be like a demi matte, but no, this is a traditional powder matte. Ooh, that is a deep forest green. And underneath, we have a much more vibrant, I mean, this is like straight up Crayola crayon primary green. Now for the metallic green, and underneath what seems to be more like that iridescent fluorescent green. So first here is the metallic green, beautifully shiny and more of an iridescent. I like this formula. This is a nice shimmery formula. It's not shiny, but it has a nice softness, like soft glow effect when it's blended out. What looks to be similar to the traffic light green we first swatched, but I think this actually, well, let's see. I'm detecting more of like a demi matte finish to it, but here we go. Here is that more, well, more of like a yellow green, and then next to it we have, I guess this would be more of like a dark green, yes. So this is like a blackened, like pine green Or would you say this is more like the pine green? I think this takes on more of like that demi-matte finish also. Now what looks to be an antique gold green, and underneath a soft yellow shimmer. Here's the antique gold, and here is that soft yellow shimmer. Generous green and yellow for all you green lovers out there. And he stayed pretty true to the green theme. Probably would have added like an olive in there to replace maybe the primary green, but I'm not a makeup artist and I do not come even close to the experience Hung has with color and everything. That's just from a beauty enthusiast perspective who likes palettes. Doesn't hold much weight, but that's just an observation. And next, this is like more of like a true blue. Ooh, that's bright. And then underneath, what looks to be more of like a turquoise, and I think the turquoise is more of like that demi. So this is more of like a, oh my gosh, that's like a cobalt powder blue, and here we have what I think is like a demi-matte turquoise. It's not a metallic. You see a little bit of sheen there, but I think that'll be quite lovely to blend where it's not gonna be, because turquoise powders can be a little tricky, so I would understand why Hung went with the hybrid formula for that color. We have the Midnight, which feels demi-matte, and our first blue metallic. We got the Midnight blue, yes, and now that blue metallic. Ooh, that is rich. That just reads night, just starry night type. Light matte blue, what feels like, and this is like almost like a sky blue. So we got the light pastel blue and more like a sky blue, which I think is in that demi-matte formula. And now we have the second metallic. This is an icy blue and what feels like an aquamarine powder matte pastel. So we have that icy blue and that powder matte, almost like a pastel blue. So here's the blue. Here are the greens. I like the blue a lot. This metallic is a little more powdery than other metallics I swatched in the palettes, but let's see how it goes on the skin. So with that said, we just have one left. Because I already swatched the orange palette in my original video, you can head over to that timestamp so you don't have to watch the entire thing, but I want to get into Composed Cool. And funny, when I show this the first time on camera, even I thought suddenly the picture looked or just went black and white. It's crazy how the effect this palette has on the visual, right? I mean, totally dedicated cool. We got to start with this silver and what looks to be, yes, I think Hung went with the demi-matte for the black because probably, ooh, that's shiny, predicting that it will be easier. Whoa, that's rich. That's rich. Even though he went with the demi-matte, as I was saying before I interrupted myself, just totally impressed by this color texture. Woof. Because it is a little creamier, it might be easier to blend out on the lids. If Hung predicted that someone would feel intimidated using a black shadow to kind of soften the texture a little bit, maybe that'll be easier to use and handle. Now we have a deep charcoal, which looks to be like that hybrid demi-matte, and this lighter charcoal gray. Ooh, I love that. That's pretty. Ooh, yes, I love a warmer light gray. This reminds me of Xenon for sure. I think Natasha's Xenon was one of her best. And quick tangent, I haven't purchased Natasha's new palettes yet because I just don't feel compelled to own those since I already have Biba, which I know old, is large, and it doesn't have as many metallics as what's found now in her new soft and dramatic palettes. I might get them down the road on sale. But if you were wondering, I'm not in a rush. I'm so sorry to crush your dreams if you thought I was. A light shimmer, what feels to be, and I think this, well, let's see. This is this silvery shimmer shade. And here we have another charcoal. This is more of like a blue leaning gray. And I think it is in that more demi-matte finish. And lastly, we have this gorgeous gray metallic with what looks to be, maybe my eyes deceive me, but it almost looks like, well, no, I think this is like a true powder matte white. So that is the silver or the more charcoal, and that is the matte white. there is Composed Cool. I know it might seem super dramatic at first glance, but listen, if you already have other palettes that you love to wear that are already neutral and they provide you those daily looks, Composed Cool is going to give you the red carpet glam. You know what I mean? So that means we got to get started and prep these lids for look number 1. I prepped with my Suku eye primer, and I'll start off with Wonderfully Warm. I think I would like to see one of these hybrids in action, and I'm taking my Eyeshadow Bobo Collab Kolinsky brush. I know it's a blender, but I just want to see how this texture does if I wanted to go one and done and to shade the eye with this color. And I also wanted to see how it performs underneath the metallic. So you can see it adds a little bit of warmth, but it's not overly warm, which is what I like. And I enjoy the tone of this shadow because it's something I can throw on the entire lid and just be ultra simple with it. Now we can go more warm with this, what I would classify as like more of like a caramel. It's like an apricot caramel, and I'm throwing that through the crease so we can start the smoke out. I think what I'll do is commit to this shade here, but will invite the dark brown on the caramel apricot side. And this is a true powder matte. You saw I picked up quite a bit, and now I'm carefully working that on the outer part of my crease. And that first demi matte serves as a platform, if you will, to just carry the color up without it looking messy, right? So it kind of sets up the gradient. And if you wanted a more gradient here, I could apply more of that light caramel, take it across the edges here. So you have a smooth transition, and just working that matte on the outer V. There we go. So we got smoke on that side, and I'll place some of that powder matte here on the lower quarter of my lower lash line, just cleaning up the edges of this blend here. Yes, so it could appear a little more smooth. And now I'll pick more of this gold bronze, and Hung did mention the highest impact delivery will be with a finger. If you don't like using fingers to apply shadow, then I would suggest you use a dedicated shader for this task. And I'm just punching it along the lash line. I think the bronze color, like that more gold hue, meshes well with this lighter, almost like a warm brown shade, if you will. But I will take this dark brown powder, and instead of using it in the same way I went in with the smoky eye, this will be my designated lash line smoke shade. It sticks well, picks up well. This is a nice powder matte, but it is powdery, so be careful if you want to start off light with the smoke, because you could pick up too much if you're not careful, right? And if you feel you've lost control over the application, then you know you might have to start over. But if you start carefully, if you're light, go in with layers, then I think you'll be okay. But that dark brown is great on the lash line, easy, you know. Now I'll take this shimmer, which is not going to have the same amount of shine as the metallic, but it does provide a nice luminous finish to the inner corner. And now the more bronze on the lid for our smoky side. Because this is a little more structured, if you will, I will pick up this same metallic shade with the brush and carve in under that arc, just so I could be more precise with that application. And now the other shimmer here on the inner corner, and this lighter, I would say this is like a light apricot powder matte on the brow bone for both eyes. All right, let's apply some lashes and I'll be right back. Round 1 with Wonderful Warms featuring Gucci's matte lipstick in Eliza Ginger. I had to. I would say it was pretty straightforward. I like this formula. It's easy to use. There are a variety of different finishes that the user can experiment with and play with, and they layer well. I think it's, again, Hung's objective was as he has said, put himself in the customer's shoes to have a fairly easy color story in each palette to navigate and not feel confused or overwhelmed. And I think he delivered just that. Pretty solid. If you were wondering if you're my complexion in deciding whether you should go with the Wonderful Warms or the neutrals, well, we'll see. Let's slap on the neutrals, but I do actually like how Wonderful Warm is not like wonderfully orange, right? That's why we have the orange palette. That Hung went more like overall bronzy brown with the Wonderful Warms. I quite enjoy it, and I love how it looks with the lipstick. So, I mean, this is like fall right here. Okay, we are ready. Give me 50 degrees in the morning. I want it because I want to wear the boots and sweaters. But with that aside, let's get on with new neutral. Eliza Ginger is still on, but I'll switch her up when we get into the neutrals. Let's start off with the heavier taupe shade, because I think that might actually be lovely all over the lid. I'll be careful because I think this is an actual powder matte. So as you see, it packs quite the punch, and I'm using Sonia's Jumbo Blender. I should really be using her new brushes, but they're over there. Lisa, you are lazy because I'm gonna need my T8. The T8 has a little more movement than the Jumbo Blender. Jumbo Blender, as you saw, was great for plopping down that initial color, right? But now I need my T8 to carry it around the lid, and that's fantastic. That is the one and done 90s girl smoky eye, okay? And I love the tone of the taupe. It's not so cool tone that it just ashes me out. It gives me more structure to the lid, to the eyes in general. And I would like to follow up actually with this same shade underneath the lash line, because this will be like my go-to one and done. If I just wanted the simplest smoky eye, immediately would go in with this matte. 100%. Now we have 3 high shine metallics in the neutral shade. So if that's important to you in terms of experiencing full on Hung's just fabulous metallic formula, then the neutral palette is going to deliver just that. So that's, I think, the main advantage over Wonderful Warms. Wonderful Warms just has the 2, and these have 3. I could just stick to here. Actually, I could follow up with, where are the rest of my Kiyaki brushes? I know where they are. You know, I'm just gonna stick with the new ones. We could go in with what I think is more of like that rose gold, as I would like for this, yes, to be our designated highlight shade, but we could lightly tap that metallic on center of the lid, right? If you wanted just a little more a dimension, if you don't want it to be completely smoked out. But I am taking this ivory powder matte, placing it on the brow bone just for like that soft highlight effect, and following up with more taupe. This is the T7, as I want to have a more even application on the lid, and again following up with T8 to just blend those edges. I could follow up with the lighter taupe. I think actually this might be like the demi matte, is a softer texture, and I think that delivers a beautiful finish to the smokier taupe. It just finishes the shadow and it makes it more complete. And for the other side, we can now see this lighter taupe in action. Almost, it's like, I don't want to say mustard taupe, but there is a sandiness to it that I think pretty through the crease. It might be hard to detect on my skin tone, right? So this is basically, this is like sandalwood in a way. Sandalwood has a lot more beigey warmth to it, but that's the effect it has on my lid. It's not going to be as pronounced as what you see here from that darker taupe. But I would like to now follow up with what I think is the hybrid texture for the dark brown. And I have to say, if I were to choose what performs better, in my opinion, I like this color in the demi matte, creamy matte, something matte formula. I think is a little more even than the powder matte found in Wonderful Warm. And because of that, although I like Wonderful Warm, I think, you know, those are my shades for sure. I like the fact that this espresso comes in this hybrid formula. If you were deciding between the two and you're like, I get it, Alicia, but you know, I love my warms. I don't know, man. I think because we're gonna go in with this shade here that might not be the warmest of the warm, but this formula is incredible. I like how this is more even than the powder matte in Wonderful Warm. I do. This demi matte formula is great in the Hung VANNGO eyeshadow palettes, color story eyeshadow palettes. Following up, must with this metallic now. So taking my T7 again, I am wiping between applications to get this bronzier shade on. But see how it has, like, I guess warm is not the correct description, that it's not so cool bronze. It has a little bit of like of a rose gold, like a rosy gold maybe. I can't explain, I'm sorry. This shade here, actually, I want to take this softer shimmer taupe and place it over the powder matte. It's not going to have the same adherence as it would if placed on a bare lid, but see how that added a little bit more dimension, added a little bit of sparkle. It didn't take away the smokiness completely. It just kind of added a little bit more a texture there, and not in the bad way. Like I like how you see a little more twinkle there on the lid. And then I'll follow up with, I think this was the one we didn't use yet, yes, for inner corner highlight on this eye, taking a little bit of this espresso brown all through the lid. Yes, yes, yes. I'm just cleaning up here through the crease. Yes, yes, yes. All right, it's time for some lashes, switching this lipstick, and I'll be right back. All right, if you were trying to decide from a formula standpoint, perhaps even a color story standpoint, if you should go Wonderful Warm or New Neutral, yes, I actually would go with New Neutral. I think it is a solid foundational palette, but I favor the hybrid matte formula in the espresso over the powder matte in the Wonderful Warms. That's just my personal preference, and from my experience, I do think it's an easier shadow to use, apply, and blend, and I just can't get over the taupes. I love taupes on my skin tone. I am of a neutral undertone, and I think it is a fantastic shade to rely on for that instant shading on the eyes through the crease to provide a little bit of smokiness without it looking too glam. And I understand how this can be super glammed out, especially if I added that espresso to the outer corner in increasing the depth. But I do favor the fact that New Neutral has 3 of the metallics, including what I consider to be one of the more better performing shimmers out of all the palettes. It's creamy, it's smooth, it has nice adherence, and a color I can just apply all over the lid. I layered it over the powder taupe, but I can only imagine how lovely it would be applied solo, and then I could take the espresso black brown across the lash line for more lash volume and depth. So I'm liking New Neutral more than Wonderful Warm from a formula standpoint and a color standpoint as well. It's not so cool tone, it's just right where it needs to be, neutral, and one of the more straightforward palettes you could own. Yay, New Neutral. Up next, Rebellious Red and Pink. Ooh, reds can be tricky because they are intense. I would love to start with the rose in the demi matte formula, and of course I have to use my beloved T8, as I thought immediately when swatching this shade I can use all over the lid. And I would love to also use that more lilac, icy lilac metallic, either as a spotlight lid moment or inner corner highlight. And that already is lovely, right? We love a rose. Fantastic all over the lid, as you can see. This is like a little retro, a little mini retro from Natasha Denona, one of my personal favorite color stories from Natasha. This rose kind of reminds me of that because of the inclusions of the burgundies and the maroons in there. For the second eye, I could have went in with the rose first through the crease and then follow up with the red, but I can see, let's take a look at how the True Matte Rose performs. This will provide a little more depth of color, I think, just by nature because of the formula. I'll first start on the outer lid and then I'll toss it through the crease. You see that has far more impact than the medium rose shade in the demi matte. Going in with a little bit of this light pastel pink to blur the edges of that matte through the crease. And now for the lid. Well, I did mention that I wanted to try the red because let's see, this is a true, I have to swatch to remember. I think this actually was, yes, this is the creamy. So we will have a lot more control over this color because of its lighter texture. I'm happy that Hung decided to formulate the red in the hybrid formula, because if it would have been a powder matte, I think just a little tougher to control. I mean, you can, I will be able to handle it, but someone who's a beginner, I think the shadow would run away from them quickly if they don't have, or if they picked up too much color, and it could be super intense on that first application. So happy to see that Hung went with the hybrid formula in this brick red shade, because it is incredibly easy and smooth to manipulate. See that? See that lovely gradient? And now, whew, what can we do next? Well, I would like to take this brick metallic actually and place it on our second eye. Well, you know, this is more of a shimmer metallic, is more burnished than it is super shiny as what we've seen in the other palettes. Is softer than the shinier metallics, so you could actually just use that color to place all over the lid. But you see how much of an impact it has. It's giving you, I was gonna say sick eye, because if you are lighter than me, Rebellious red and pink might not be on your wish list, simply because, you know, it's going to give you Halloween eye. This could be your Halloween palette if you're going for the vampire look. I'll take the softer, what I see to be a matte with shimmer in the powder. This is not going to have as much of a pronounced show of highlight, as you can see. It provides highlight, I think, by default from the shade. But if I wanted a little more sparkly arcly, I would have to go in with the more fluorescent pink or the lilac. But I want to see this lilac actually in, or orchid, I should say. Maybe it's more orchid. That has a nice highlight effect and a beautiful contrast, right? Because we have the rose and the red going on, and all of a sudden we got this orchid on the inner corner. And allow me to follow up actually with the red I applied on the outer V on the lower part of my lash line. And then taking that fluorescent pink, actually, not only will I apply that fluorescent pink on top of the sparkly matte, but I want to take my finger and place it on the center of that softer red metallic to add a little bit of dimension, so there is more of a highlight effect there on the center of my lid. And I want to clean up the edges for this eye. So let me take a much smaller brush. I'm looking, here we go, my Reference Shoto brush, and I'm using the light pastel shade, so I don't add more color, but I definitely buff the edges here and blur them out. I want to follow up with the same matte I applied here on the outer V, a little more of that orchid here on the lower inner lash line. I didn't apply anything on this part of my eye because this is where that first rose laid on. I kind of want to go in with the fluorescent pink just to add a little, like another layer, right? So I'm tapping that on. I'm just taking my time so it can spread. Yes, we like. All right, let's apply some lashes and choose the red because I got some nice reds to pair with this look. And I'll be right back. Rebellious red and pink. Actually, I love these colors, but I know I'm aware of my skin tone and how I can get away with red, and I'll be willing to actually wear this. Like, I will wear this during a conference. I would, because they're not so potently red that I feel it would appear too costumey or too avant-garde, although I am well aware of how quickly it could get there depending on the layering and how I choose to go intense with the shading and all that. But I do enjoy the softer texture, and again, as I had said while in the demo, I appreciate how this muted brick red was formulated in the softer hybrid matte formula, because I do think it applies more diffuse and not as intense, and actually makes the color more wearable because of the texture and the finish. And the rest of the shades in here are fantastic. I do think this shade is I don't want to say is the dud shade. It's not completely true, but in terms of impact, this is going to be the softest shade, right? Perhaps the one you would apply on the entire lid if you don't want high shine, sparkle, or a metallic finish. It's going to give your lid a little bit of highlight and a little bit of sheen by default, because it does have pearl in there, so you see that it's not completely flat, right? But I do like the shimmer formula better in Neutral in that taupe color. It's like a mauvey taupe. I think it lovely. But Rebellious Red and Pink is fun, especially if you love this color story. If you know, you're like, I wear reds and pinks all the time. I would say, sure, if you already have Natasha Denona's Retro, if you have the newly released Byredo Bibliophilia, then perhaps you might not need this color story. But I like the size of it. It's smaller, it's more edited. It gets right to the point in including the muted brick red, the roses, and the metallic fluorescent pink and fluorescent orchid shades, which I think lovely as highlight and give a beautiful glow, and just it's a nice change or a beautiful contrast to the reds and roses in here. I would still choose Neutral because I think that's a more practical purchase, especially if you are building your wish list for the upcoming Sephora sale that is scheduled to go live in November. I think November is the month. But if you feel that this is worth your purchase because you know you're going to use these shades more often than someone who just would not go near them, then something for you to think about. So right now it is 3:30 in the afternoon. So this is probably going to be a two-parter where I don't know if I'll edit this video first, but I think what I'll do is edit the footage I have now and continue filming tomorrow with fresh eyes. Removing and applying does a number on my skin. Not too bad though, but I won't get stressed about not being able to film everything on one day. Totally fine. So in advance, the lighting might be a little different in the second half of this video when we dive into Passionate Purple, the Generous Greens, and of course, Composed Cool. So I will see you next day, but on this video, I'll see you back in a second. Magic of editing. And we're back for day 2. Also wanted to mention on the cheeks today, a subscriber had let me know that a friend of hers didn't quite like the color wash from Victoria Beckham in Flush. So she asked if I would provide it a new home, and I said yes. So I have it on today, and my goodness, this is an exceptional product. I know it's a pain to deal with. It can feel like it if you're more adapted to powders or creamier cheek products. It's drippy, it's liquidy, but man, it is just perfect. But we'll continue today with our Hung VANNGO Beauty Color Story Eyeshadow Palette tutorial, or more so a brief review through each palette. We looked at the swatches, we went through the first few, and now we have to finish the 4 we have left today, and we continue with Passionate Purple. But I gotta bring you in a little closer. And for all looks you've seen thus far, I prepped my lids with Suku's eye primer, and let's see, I actually want to start with the cooler tone lilacs. I like how Hung went more cool neutral with the purples and didn't go berry plum, as we kind of saw from Natasha's, my gosh, my memory, Roxa palette. Some would argue is actually not purple monochromatic. It's more purple plum, and I get that entirely, but I want to try this shade first. This cool purple, and is a powder matte so it's not going to have the same finish as the hybrid mattes. And on me, it's going to take on more of a grayish tone. If I want more color richness, I will have to tap the color in and build it in that way. If I want it to act as more of like a wash to provide that diffused finish along the edges of a darker purple, then I will probably weigh in applying one of these first. And I can actually do that. So I'll start the other side. I know we're like going full throttle here. Picking up what I think is the hybrid, and it's a lot creamier feeling than the powder matte. And from already using 4 of Hung's palettes, I can say that his hybrid matte formula is by far my favorite out of all the palettes I've used thus far, because I think it's easy to pick up, apply, and blend. It checks off all 3 boxes, and especially with colors that might be more intimidating to deal with. And that's a nice color purple. Again, it's straight on the purple part of the spectrum and doesn't have any red in there. And now I'll follow up with this more lilac leaning, so it doesn't have as much cool gray tones as the one I applied first on my right eye, your left maybe, but I'm using that lighter powder matte to buff the edges of the hybrid matte. So you can see we're creating a nice gradient there. I'll follow up with the outer lower quarter with the powder matte shade. I could also follow up with that creamy powder here as well. Actually, I'm going to run it all the way through because I do love a smoky, hazy eye. And for the other side, we can actually dive into this color. This is a more traditional powder matte, and I'm going in with Sonia's T8, so I can lay down an even serving of that matte so we can start building the color. Also taking it on the lower part of my lash line, and I just want to clean up the gradient here and punch in a little more of that matte here through the crease and through the socket, and then take everything around for a final blend. There's a little bit of unevenness here, but I'm trying to combat that by using the shader brush and tapping on color and not just blending it out. But I'm only focusing on the edges and not manipulating the intensity here that I want to stay on my outer lid. Well, that's nice. I like what's happening. Now, deciding on what's going to be our Showtime shades for the lid, because we do have like this softer shimmer that can be nice on the lid as just more of like a diffused look there, but I definitely want to go in with the shinier metallics, right? So let's go in with this, what I categorize as like a cool tone lilac. So that has pretty sparkle and nice reflectivity. And I'm following up with the shader here to pick up more product and place it on the inner part of my crease, like right underneath the arc here, for more even lay down, because I wanted to combine well with the matte here we have on the outer lid. And just for the sake of using as many shadows as possible, I could also go in with this soft shimmer shade that I swatched here and use it on the inner part of my arc to combine that cooler lilac we applied initially, and just to have something else there, yeah, for contrast. We could either go in with this soft shimmer powder for the inner corner or use the lighter tone metallic, but I think this color provides nice highlight. It's not going to have the same reflectivity as what's found in the metallic finish, but I think we'll be all right. For this side, we'll definitely go in with the lighter metallic, and this sports an icier look to it. It's actually quite pretty. It has like an iridescent feel to it, which I think lovely, not only on the lid, as you see here, but could be great on the inner corner. Taking a little more of that hybrid purple on the seam here for a nice transition. And actually, I'll take this cooler lilac that we placed here through our crease on first eye and use that as like a juncture closure, if you will, just to introduce another shade but I think it's lovely. It has just a nice shadowing effect to the socket here, but it doesn't appear so shadowy that the entire look gets kicked out of place, right? In terms of what I'm looking to achieve here. I do want to place a little more on the very outer portion of my eye, just so we could smoke it out a little more. It can appear blended, you know? No unblended spots on these eyes, okay? And for the inner corner, I could follow up in the same manner and use this, let me pick a smaller brush, the lighter shimmery pink shade here. Okay, and actually I'll take that second or first metallic we use, but on the lower inner part of my eye. All right, time for some lashes and I'll be right back. And here are the final looks using Passionate Purple. I like it. I like the purple palette, but just scanning over the purple palettes I have in my current collection, ones that come to mind, as I already mentioned, Natasha Denona's Roxa, and of course her legendary Lila palette that released years ago. I'm also thinking of Viseart. Viseart loves purples. The recently released, well, not really, last year, but I recently received Lilas, even Violette, and many others that, yes, I prefer over this one. That's not to say that this formula is terrible. It is certainly not. I think many would actually appreciate the creamy matte hybrid that's in this purple color here and the lilac metallics. What falls short are the softer shimmer shades that are nice, but they're quite powdery. They don't have the same impact as the metallics in here, right? So they do play a role, especially as I use this lighter powder for inner corner highlight. I most certainly could have used this metallic for inner corner instead of a lid highlight. But again, just quickly mentioning the other purple palettes that I own, if I were to choose, I would reach for those more. Simply because I like the color stories, but I also like the different tones of purples, and Viseart is just goated in formulating purples, period. Not only in the mattes, but as well as the shimmers and the metallics. And I could quickly show you just for a quick comparison. Now, in Hung's defense, he wanted to develop a purple color story, all purples or varieties of, and Viseart's Violette is more of like purple with a neutral sensibility, right? So it's not going to be all purple. It's going to have some neutrals in there, which in my opinion, I think more interesting to play with, but that's just me. That's just someone who likes the wild card shades, but also likes to mix in neutrals with that same color base, meaning these mattes are more mauvey to complement the higher voltage violets you have here on the bottom, right? And Lilas is not actually purple, so that was my mistake. This is more of like a softer lilac story that carries more of a neutral tone, but is just overall more cool and ethereal in feel. And of course you have Violet Vespertine, that's more wine, right? If you wanted to go more purple, then I would go with Violette. Or if you have Viseart's old Theory palette, the mini 6 pans, that was one of the best purple palettes out at the time. So if you're looking at Hung's purple palette, and if you already have, again, Roxa, Lilas, and Violette, it's not a must. In my opinion, it's not a must. I think you'll be totally fine with those other palettes, but if you want to get it on sale, maybe Hung will run, I don't know, because he just released his brand, so don't know if we're going to see any promotions just yet, right? I don't even think maybe November. We'll see what the team decides to do. But out of all the ones I've applied thus far, Passionate Purple is lower on the hierarchy for me. I would say higher on the totem pole for me will be New Neutral, even Rebellious Red and Pink. I think that's a great palette as well. What did I use yesterday? Wonderful Warms. Was that it? Wonderful Warms, New Neutral, Rebellious Red, because I already used orange on my original video, yes. So we yet have to go through the blues, the cools, and the greens. So with that said, all thoughts laid out for Passionate Purple. Let me get this off the lid and I'll be right back for the next demo. Next, we have Brilliant Blue. I don't wear blues often. It is a shade that that I like to use as an accent one. For example, one of Prada Beauty's quads has that almost cerulean bright blue on the top pan, and the rest of the shades are neutrals. So it's there to serve as a pop of color, right? But this is all blue. And if you're one to enjoy blue looks on the daily, then let's have at it. I think I would like to actually compose blue. I'm making up names already. Brilliant Blue has 3 of the hybrid matte formulas. So I'm excited about that because I've expressed throughout this entire video thus far how I enjoy Hung's hybrid matte formula. And let's see, I think I'll start with the more teal, and I'm using Sonia's Jumbo Blender to, there we go. As I suspected, this formula is incredible with blues because I think you just feel more comfortable in blending out this shade because it's not your typically formulated powder matte. Although I will use the mattes in here to blend the edges. And let's see here. Let me go back to my Shoto 3 from Refer. I could go in with like a cobalt. I could do the cobalt, or I could do the lighter sky blue. Ooh, let's see what the cobalt's doing. I'm just lightly here brushing against the edges so we can create a nice gradient here. I would go the diffusing route with the blue matte. I wouldn't rely on the matte formula to be as even as what you see here of a lay down with the hybrid creamy matte formula. I think you'll have a better time using the creamier matte for your outer lid work, just from my perspective and how I like to apply my shadow. But depending on how your technique goes, what you're comfortable with. But I think that's nice shading already from the cobalt blue. It moved the more teal leaning one to appear softer through the socket. Now I gotta see this lighter blue in action, or maybe we can use that as like a lid moment. Oh, I don't know. Okay, how about this? Let's try the lighter sky blue as a light crease setup first, because, well, actually that could be a great highlight, I'm thinking. But let's see, going in with what it's like, I guess this is like the cerulean. This is like a tropical blue. You know, this reminds me of Natasha Denona's Tropic. That will be, or this will be phenomenal in that palette, my goodness. And I'm tapping here on the outer edges just to be careful with the lay down, because I think I want to see this midnight in action as well as potential smoke for our lighter blue eye. Using Sonia's T8 to carefully blur the edges, see where that takes us, because I think I'll go in with T7 now and see what this midnight blue is doing, how much it's going to lay down. So I'm not getting as much color payoff as I would probably get if this was the first shade I applied on the lid. Since I'm layering, it's not going to have as an intense of a delivery of color. I will probably have to use this solo on the lid and then follow up with the tropical blue shade, which is fine, totally fine. I just wanted to see how that would perform in a layered situation. But as you can see, it gave some shading, but not to a high degree, right? Just enough to cause or show a little bit of contrast there. But now I want to go in with this icy blue that has a little more texture than some of Hung's metallics in here. It's a little flakier. It kind of reminds me of Danessa's older, flakier formula in her Lightwork palettes, where she was arriving at like S-tier Lightwork 6 status. But until she got there, some of the finishes were quite flaky and a little tough to lay down on the lid smoothly. So I don't know if you can see on the inner part of my corner here where there's a lot of lid texture, it kind of looks wrinkly. The flakes look a little wrinkly, but that's okay. I'm just gonna kick off the fallout there because this metallic in particular is a little on the chunky side, but I wanted to see this matte in action, this kind of sea light foamy pastel. So I think that's lovely as an inner corner highlight, and I actually like to do that from other palettes that have a similar looking shade and use the matte in like Natasha Denona's pastel. So I'm always bringing up Natasha Denona. She just has such standout color stories that immediately come to mind when drawing these comparisons. It's just what I'm used to when I have in my collection as an immediate example. I want to bring in a little more of our tropical blue here on the lower lash line. We have to finish eye number 1, and we're going into smoky territory since the only shade we haven't used thus far is this metallic midnight shade. And you could already see what we have on the lid. So let's see what we'll get when laying down this darker blue shade. I'm taking it on lid to the inner part of my crease and would like to use this medium color powder matte on the inner part of the arc so that it could have some color there, a little bit of brightening perhaps, and also using our pencil brush with that teal on the lower part of the lash line. And actually, because I'm not crazy about this flakier metallic texture, I am returning to the pastel blue for highlighting on this side. I know you're probably screaming inside because I'm not applying eyeliner. I know, but what I can do actually, let me grab the brush, hold on. I could use Sonia's T9, grab the hybrid midnight shade, and use that to place on my waterline. Hopefully I don't get any red eyes from this, but that's nice. Because it's not a powder, it might have better adherence to the waterline. And since the T9 is incredibly soft, it doesn't feel pokey at all. And I just have to clean up a little bit under the eyes because we have some fallout. You know, blue is mighty pigmented, and just so we can have a cleaner canvas here. Oh, I already got some blue in my eyeball. Oh boy. The blue, unfortunately, is traveling, but what are you gonna do? Try. So if you have a dedicated blue liner, just use that, right? I just wanted to see what we can get from that application. But yeah, let's apply these lashes and I'll be right back. Here are our close-ups of Brilliant Blue, and I must say one of the more impressive palettes out of the, yes, they're all color stories, but the purples, and well, we haven't tried the greens yet, so maybe I'll hold back my final opinion on that. But I'm happy that Hung went with the hybrid formula for 3 of the blues in there that I would say are like the pillars, right? You got the teal, you got the more sky blue, and then you have the midnight blue, which we didn't see in action solo. I had attempted to apply that hybrid matte midnight blue on the outer corner, but was unsuccessful in bringing out its full potential color wise. But I'm sure if I had applied it like I did the first teal blue solo on the outer corner without another shadow underneath it, I would have been more successful in seeing that deeper, almost stormy blue hue on my lid. But I could save it for another day. Even the mattes I thought were nice to have on the inner corner, or even as like an all matte look on the lid. The shade that was okay was this icier blue, but because it's so flaky, you just have to be careful with how much you pick up, because once the flakes lay flat, they have a nice iridescent look to the skin, right? But you have to achieve that finish versus it being too chunky looking on the lid. But what will probably happen is once it mixes with my lid oils that will naturally come through, it will probably look shinier and more sparkly just by default, because the oils I think will help kind of lay these flakier bits flatter on the skin, where it'll have a more reflective effect. That's what I'm predicting. But if you love blues, I think something to consider. I don't know if it's worth paying the entire $49 for, just for a palette you might not use as often as one that houses neutral shades, right? That's just from a practical standpoint. From a personal standpoint, if I have to be honest, I tend to not pay full price for color stories that I know I'm not going to use as often, right? That's just a me thing. But let me know what you think down below. Brilliant blue is nice, but I cannot wait to get into these greens, the greens. So we'll see what we have, and I'll be back here in a minute. Generous green and yellow. I have a lot of ideas, and learning from our previous demo, want to go in with the dark forest green and the hybrid matte formula right away, setting up the outer lid. So of course going in with Sonia's T7, so that picks up quite a bit. Wait, I didn't prime my lids. I just have concealer on. You know what, I'm just gonna leave it like that. I wouldn't recommend that step if you were actually wearing these eye looks out, because I'm removing them. Whoa, that's pretty. Thrilled this deep pine green comes in the hybrid matte, because see how even that is? I didn't blend it out, but just that alone is pretty. And I'm dying to see, well, we could go several ways. We could use the Crayola green to blend the deep pine forest green out, or we could go in with both being the hybrid matte formula. So this more olive leaning versus the more like lime. Let's go with the Crayola green. I'm interested to see how it will translate on the eye. So much like what I did with the blues, I'm using the green powder mattes as our blender diffuser shades. Carefully moving through the far edges using light pressure. Oh boy, we are in it, okay? We don't have a choice, we're in it. Continuing with that application using my pencil brush. And actually, let me grab my concealer, because I have some here on back of hand, just to carefully clean up the edges there, right? Because you see, this packs a lot of punch in terms of color, right? I don't want it to run that low. Okay, let's now go in with, I actually want to see this brighter green as the outer corner moment, and definitely going in with my T7 in the same manner as I applied that dark green, starting off with the tapping, laying it on evenly, and we'll decide from there where I want to go, because I want to see this olive. And I think I'll grab my Bobo and Eyeshadow collaboration. This is a Kolinsky brush, and will pick up more than perhaps the goat hair brush I have here, because I want to see a more pronounced delivery. Thing is, I don't think you can detect the distinction between the two greens. I do see in the pan that one is more olive leaning and the other has a little more vibrancy to it, but it's fine. I'm just carefully carving out my smoky wing here, and let's carry down the brighter green here on the outer lower. Actually, I'm going to bring it all the way. And man, we have a lot of options here for lid shades. I think I'm going to go in with the more antique. I think that'll be lovely for this eye, since it's greens and yellows, right? Hung formulated it to include a little bit of like that gold element, I think, which is great, because gold and green are like, you know, it's hand in hand. Using my brush to clean up the application, have a little more here on the inner arc. And actually, I want to invite this lemon shimmer powder. So this actually is one of the better performing powder shimmers, I think. Out of all 8 palettes thus far, we still have to apply Composed Cool. I'll use that shade, however, as our inner corner highlight of choice. It's not going to have that same brightening, shiny effect as what you see here with the antique shade, but totally fine, because now we're going in with this true metallic green, and I'm placing this on eye number 1. And Hung did say if you want more of a bling bling finish to use your finger. This green is a little on the drier side. So the antique green has a little more wetness to it, so it makes for better pickup. The drier consistency though is more even than like that flakier formula found in Brilliant Blue. Is interesting. This appears almost like minty. It doesn't look minty in the pan, but when you combine it with this darker green, there's an interesting shift going on in the lid. And of course, we got to follow up with this iridescent mint shade, and that will be our inner corner highlight of choice. And actually, I want to follow up with the dark green here as a liner moment for the yellow green eye, because this has great pickup, fantastic intensity, and as you can see, I mean, my goodness, right off the bat with the smoky. All right, time to apply some lashes and I'll be right back. Final looks using generous green and yellow. And let's see, I think out of all three, like the color heavy palettes, I probably can include the orange palette as well, the Rebellious red and pink. Generous green is up there. I would say because of the inclusion of these hybrid mattes, makes it easy to work with these types of greens. You just have to be careful with the fallout capacity, because you can't pick up too much with your brush, as I did. Since I had fallout on the center or offside of my nose that I had to wipe off and apply concealer just to start over again, I actually should apply a little bit of blush. Let me go in with some Orchid from Dior, because I think this would be a lovely pairing with the greens. Back to my impromptu ranking. Rebellious red, let's see, I would probably place, who would I place first? You know what? I think I'm gonna have to go with the blue first. Blue was pretty killer, I gotta say. I wouldn't use that palette all the time, but it'll be blue, green, red, orange, purple. That will be my ranking for the colorful palettes, because Rebellious red and pink was great. The purple was, because it didn't have as many of the creamy mattes in there and more powdery mattes, the outcome was a little uneven for me, and I probably will have to experiment in using a different brush or just relying on those more cool tone lilac mattes for diffusing purposes and not the standout choice for my outer lid. I'm actually looking at this eye. I have to apply a little bit of more mint here, I feel like. Better. Whereas the colorful palettes that have more of the hybrid matte formula, I think are better performing. The orange one, let me get the orange one because it's been a while. Outstanding Orange, I demonstrated in my first video. I would say my main critique is that it doesn't have like that deep color if I wanted to intensify my look, because you have like the deep forest green from Generous Green and Yellow, you have that deep midnight from Brilliant Blue, even that teal. This is a little more mid-tone across the board, and why I'm not ranking it higher than blue or green. And it has this gorgeous rose gold metallic here with the softer shimmers, right? I think the metallic is shinier than the softer shimmers, and the powder formula works better generally with more warmer tones like the browns, the reds, and in this case the oranges. And the one hybrid shade is like this muted pumpkin, which is pretty. It could be all over the lid or however you want to use it, but that would be my ranking. And I think I do well with greens because I am of a neutral undertone. So it's like a nice escape, I think, if I wanted to do an all-out colorful eye. I like the blue too. I'm neutral, so I could wear either. But this forest green right here, this is my MVP shade. It is. I love it. I love how much smoke it gives, how it's almost like swampy. And then of course, if I want it to be a little more vibrant, I could use these greens here. All right, so I hope that helped. We got one more. We're almost done. Compose Cool, that I have to, of course, compare to Xenon and Mini Xenon because that's what I immediately thought of. So let's get these shadows off and I'll be back here in a minute. Woo-wee, last palette, let's go. Compose Cool. We have the charcoal, black, silver, and that black comes in that hybrid matte. I think I will start with that first. Should we? We have to. And I also have to wash these brushes. They have been soldiers in this entire demonstration from yesterday through today. And they're a little stained from the more colorful pigments found in Brilliant Blue and Generous Green. But that's okay. Going in and being careful not to pick up too much, because I don't want the fallout. I want these pigments to stay on the lid, but you can see what we get immediately with this hybrid black. Happy it's in this creamier formula because it's easy to pick up and lay down and will be easy also to blend. What I've been doing is relying on the medium shades for my diffusing needs. And yes, we have a little green here still on the bristles, but I'm gently wiping on the towel, releasing excess pigment. And I think I'm gonna go with the light cool gray, which actually has a little bit of warmth in there, and it comes in that hybrid matte formula, which I think fantastic for this task because it's already pretty smoky on the outer lid. And I don't want to add more smokiness and depth through the crease with those medium charcoal shades. I'm saving those for our second eye and using the cool gray to diffuse the edges here to get a nice smooth gradient. And you can see how the black is mostly staying intact, right? Because I'm just brushing the edges. If I wanted to increase the depth, have it a little more intense, I can go back in with a shader. But now, so you might not see any distinction between these two charcoal grays. You can detect a little more of a stormy blue lean for this gray, or is it this gray? On the viewfinder, it looks, it's hard to tell. I think this one here has a little bit of that stormy gray, and the second one here on the top is more silvery gray. We can apply, let's see, I'm gonna take the more stormy gray, and of course, we'll go in with Sonia's Jumbo Blender as I want the entire lid to be covered with this shade. I'm tapping to lay down the color, bringing it through the crease, and maybe we can use the more silver gray to blend out through our socket. And I'll gently take that here so the color doesn't run away. I'm using light pressure because my lids are quite sensitive at this point, as well as my face, as I had to reapply my concealer, my highlighter, a little bit of the blush that sat on center of face. So I don't want to apply a ton of pressure here just because it's a little prickly right now, but that's nice. I like what's happening. I could follow up with a quick finger tap just to cover the lid a little more. But now we have two metallics in this silver icy shade and more of a charcoal gray. This is a softer silver shimmer that I think is one of the more better performing shimmers out of all 8 palettes. That could be for the lid. It could also be for the inner corner. You know what? We haven't given the shimmers much love, have we? I'm saying we like you're in this with me. I haven't. So let's actually go in with the softer shimmer on our lid to see what it does, and I think it's going to have more of a luminous glow effect versus a high shine one. And I'm taking that on, tapping it in around, and that has pretty good adherence. You see it's not going to have the same high shine effect as the metallic, but that's fine. We'll save that metallic shade for our inner corner, but I think that's nice. Nice and silvery and almost like for lack of a better word. Try again, Alicia. Now with this metallic silver, I'll place this on our inner corner. Yes. You see there's a lot more reflectivity there. There's a little more shine. Probably hard to tell because the inner corner is a much smaller area than the lid here, but that's fine. That actually has, well, maybe it's because the brush had a little bit of green still, so it influenced the silver to be more like a light, well, not green silver, but something's going on now with that metallic spine. Following up with the charcoal metallic, and I'm actually bringing this on the entire lid and having those metallic charcoal shades serve as like a nice smoky backdrop for this. Using my jumbo blender just to blend the edges of that metallic, and maybe seeing this light pastel in action. My poor brushes are just color me silly. Okay, I think I got off enough for this one because I want to see this pastel matte as a possible highlight moment. Yes, definitely have to pack it in there so it can show as more opaque for that highlight effect. And actually picking up this silver and bringing it here on the inner lower lash line. And actually want to follow up with this medium charcoal, the one I place all over lid here for our lower lash line. Cleaning up through the crease, I want a little more color here because I do prefer the blend pull out to be on the more angular end versus round for me, but you can take it whatever silhouette you think appropriate for your eye shape. I do think a slightly diffused wing kind of flick out is complementary to my eye shape, but do whatever you need to do. Finishing up this eye and going in with the hybrid matte black, so I want to complete this smoke out, and I actually want to apply a little more coloring here on the outer lid. Since we've already blended that black out through the crease, I just wanted to darken that up a bit. And I can always go in with some light flicking motions to just combine that color with that lighter gray. And I think that's it. I'm actually going to pick up a little more of our silver here and place it on the inner lower lash line. Okay. And actually, you know, I gotta do it. I must. Picking up the black. I have a lot of green on my little T9. So wiping that off because I do want to trace my lash line for our charcoal eye and just kind of prep here for my lash band. All right, let's apply these lashes and I'll be right back with the final look. I know I took a chance applying a glossy deep brown shade with the grays and the blacks and the silvers, but you know, I think it works out. Let me know down below. Compose Cool is lovely, especially if you gravitate towards the silvers, the blacks, the high glam, red carpet, smoky eye shades that will instantly deliver those looks. And I do enjoy the fact that Composed Cool use the hybrid creamy matte formula to deliver these medium tone charcoals, which I've always found to be lovely to work with because they almost have on my skin tone, because I am neutral, when I apply gray, it always, well, I suppose it depends on the undertone, but most of the time, and what I discovered when using Natasha's Xenon, they have a little bit of like a stormy blue lean or even like a navy. Depends, because some just intentionally have navy in there. These do not, but because again of my complexion and depending on how the gray is, cool or warm, it always has like a little bit of that stormy blue feel about it, which I love. In regards to the formula, I do enjoy the formula overall in Compose Cool because as you can see, the softer shimmer shade is not as powdery and has a little more creaminess and adherence to the lid that delivers a really nice luminous effect there. And of course, having this black in the hybrid formula is fantastic. I think it makes it easy to use, to pick up, to apply, and to blend. And you have these other charcoals at your disposal to create lovely gradients. You have the light pastel white matte to create a beautiful highlight effect, albeit not as intensely as the high shine silver metallic in here, but a nice escape for it to look softer overall. Or you can go full on matte and use that white powder on the entire lid for like that blanked out, like black and white movie, old Hollywood effect on the eyes. Now to quickly show this next to Xenon, if you have Xenon, you technically don't need Compose Cool, but you can see that Compose Cool has a lot more of the medium grays in there. Of course, if you have mini Xenon, you have the medium gray matte. So this is like a edited version of what you find in Compose Cool. And this is Natasha's shiny metallic in the silver. And I'll quickly show you Hung's in Compose Cool. Hung's has a little more, they're similar actually, but I was going to say is a little lighter. Is a little lighter in the color, whereas Natasha's is a little more, dare I say, medium. I know it's hard to tell, but there is a slight nuance difference there in terms of the depth. And of course, with Xenon, forget it. You got a ton of different shimmers in here, ranging from ones that have a taupe kind of element to it. The pink, Snowbow is like, it has blue, it has pink. There's a lot going on in Snowbow. I say Snowbow, but I think it's bow. Supersonic is a really nice silver too. It's, I think, the more dedicated actual silver shimmer from Xenon. And Rhyme is pretty much what this silver from Compose is doing. So Rhyme is lighter in general, and the shimmer from Compose Cool is more gray, but you definitely get more shine from Rhyme that you find in Xenon. And lastly, Stellar, your designated sparkly arcly shade, is more of like a topper shade that you can apply over any of these. But all that to say, yes, from a practical standpoint, if you got Xenon, if you have mini Xenon, you technically don't need Compose Cool. But if you don't have any dedicated black, gray, silver palettes, then you can consider Compose Cool. I think it's solid, especially again because of the creamy matte formula. It makes it easy to deal with these more intense depth gray shades, the black shade. Yeah, so this was great to work with. And if I were to now rank the more neutral leaning offerings from the Color Story portfolio, New Neutral, I think for me is up there. I would actually rank it New Neutral, Compose Cool, and Wonderful Warm. That would be my ranking for the more neutral part of the portfolio. And then I mentioned my ranking for the more colorful palettes in, I think, the green segment. So yeah, that is how I would rank them and what I would prioritize in terms of purchase. I have so many eyeshadow palettes, and I'm just grateful for the Hung VANNGO Beauty team in sending all of these palettes in PR and allowing me the opportunity to try them, to show you, so you can make a more informed decision if you decide to not buy any of them, or you're gonna buy a few. Maybe you'll wait for the Sephora sale. Whatever route you go, I hope this video helped. And if you made it this far, make sure you like this video. It's a long one. By clicking that thumbs up, it helps me tremendously, letting the YouTube algorithm know that I'm worth watching. for eyeshadow palette reviews, and will continue to recommend my videos as well as to other eyeshadow palette enthusiasts like yourself, and consider subscribing for future uploads. If you like this video, you could do so by clicking that notification bell down below so you are alerted when that video drops immediately. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate your watch, but if it's your first time here, please stay, peruse some more. Maybe I'll see you in this video here. I'll definitely see you in the comments down for this one. And on here again next time.